It's May 13, 2023. We had a wet winter, a lot of rain, so everything's doing really well. These are olive flowers. I don't know what to do with this olive tree. Maybe I'm thinking of taking it down because it makes olives, but curing them takes a long time, and making olive oil was a disaster. So I don't know, maybe I'll trim it back and put a fig tree there. These are the nopales. These are a spineless variety, and I think the pads are pretty close to being ready to harvest for some nopale salad. So those things that look like spines are very soft and they won't get you. Um, this is a Dorset golden apple that I planted a year ago, and I'm letting a few fruits develop. It's still a very small tree, and it's right next to this Anna apple tree that I planted 10 years ago. But the Anna apples just generally aren't very good. They're not very crisp, and they're not very sweet, and they're not very juicy. So nothing that an apple should be. So I'm basically the only one in the family that eats this thing because I don't like to see it go to waste. But it does make a lot of apples. The tree is doing really well. It's very healthy. It's about 10 feet tall and about 15 feet across. Um, I might graft a different variety onto this tree because it's a very well developed tree now. But yeah, the apples just aren't that great. This is a peach tree that I also planted 10 years ago. Had a rough time because I don't think I gave it enough water initially, so it was struggling. And it had these fuzzy peaches that people weren't really big fans of because of too much fuzz. So what I did is I grafted a donut peach onto it. So here's the fuzzy peaches that originally were on the tree, and then I grafted these donut peaches onto it. And the donut peaches everyone likes. Everyone's a fan of the donut peaches. And I grafted these 3 years ago, and so last year was the first year that we got fruit out of them, and this year we're going to get a lot more fruit. This tree is now doing much better now that I've started watering it more appropriately. But I no, here's a orange, Valencia orange, that some squirrel found and decided this log was a great place to have lunch, and he just left it there. I don't mind them eating a few as long as they just eat a few and leave the rest alone. I hate it when they take a bite of one and a bunch of others. So I planted another donut peach tree. It's a slightly different variety, and this is its second year. In the first year, I'm letting it fruit a little bit, and we'll see if these are any different than the other donut peach tree. I think all donut peaches are pretty good though, so not too worried about them. Wild strawberries that I planted about 5 years ago, and I put them in a shady part. It only gets morning sun, and then after about 11 a.m. it doesn't get any more sun, and it seems to really like this spot. And it makes these small strawberries that never turn red. They have a really strong strawberry flavor, but they're very small, and bugs don't eat them, which is nice. So I just let them grow here, and they like this spot, and it's a nice thing to do. When I go out in the garden, I always just grab a few because there's always like 2 or 3 that are ripe every day, at least during the spring. Around when it gets really hot in the summer, it stops producing and kind of goes into survival mode. But it always perks up in the fall here in inland Southern California, and then it produces all winter and into the spring. The Korean hobak is doing really well. It's growing quite a bit, and it seems to like this spot. I put some compost on it as a top dressing, and we'll see how they do. These are Snow Queen nectarines, which I planted a Snow Queen tree about 7 years ago, but then it died because I didn't water it enough, I think. So I planted it again because the fruit is really good, and this time I hopefully won't kill it. This one is doing really well. It's the second year that we've had it. I planted it last year. And I'm letting it fruit a little bit for the first time to see what the fruit is like. And it's about 7 feet tall. I thought this was a Pinkerton avocado tree, but I posted pictures on this avocado growers Facebook page, and everyone tells me it's a Fuerte avocado. So I planted a bunch of avocado trees. Most of them died, but this one really thrived, and it got to like 15 feet tall and 20 feet across. I trimmed it back because it's leaning a certain direction. But it made a lot of flowers. I don't see any baby avocados on it yet, but it produces about 30 to 40 avocados last year, so I expect about the same. These are artichokes I planted 3 years ago. They come back every year, and this one is planted right next to this. This is definitely a fuerte avocado, but the artichoke grows so big it shades it out a bit. But then in the summer, the artichoke dies back a little bit and provides a little shade. I leave it up to provide some shade for the avocado tree while it gets bigger. And this is the tree I'm most proud of. This is a wild apricot tree that had a really strong root system and grew very vigorously, but it never made that many apricots. It only made like 2 or 3 apricots, even though it was a 10 feet tall tree. So I grafted some almonds, and you can see the almonds right there. I'm trying to grab, yeah, there's almonds. I grafted almonds and donut peaches and nectarines onto this tree. And I grafted this last year, and the scions were about the size of my pinky, and it grew 10 feet in the first year. I trimmed it back, and it's back up to like 15 feet tall. And this one tree has more donut peaches and nectarines and almonds than the donor trees have. It's much bigger, it grows much faster. It's pretty impressive. So there's the apricots. So I'm really proud of the grafting on this tree because it did very, very well. And the root system on this tree seems to be amazingly strong. And I don't really even water this tree that much. It gets water from the surrounding areas. I put in some drip around it just because I want it to do well. But it does really, really well even neglecting it. So that's a tree that's doing really well and has lots and lots of fruit. Fava beans grow really well here in the winter, and they look like they're going to be ready to harvest in a month or so. I let them dry out, and then we keep them all winter and make fool out of them. And then you can eat the tops too. The tops of the fava beans are quite good as a stir-fry vegetable. This is a moringa tree, which I think is still alive because it's not dry, but it hasn't started budding out yet, and maybe it's just not hot enough yet. So I'm hoping it's going to live. This is a wild swarm that moved into a hive here just 2 months ago, and I don't plan on getting any honey or anything from it, but they're doing very well, and I just want them around to pollinate, and they're very gentle, and they've never bothered me or anyone, so I'm happy about that. This is a Satsuma mandarin that I grafted onto our lime tree. Our lime tree is very prolific, but we don't need that many limes. So I grafted this Satsuma mandarin, which are amazing, and I think it's working because it's budding out there. So I'm hoping that gets a really strong branch, and I can make that into a Satsuma, at least half a Satsuma. This is pigeon peas or gandules. If you're from Puerto Rico, you guys know what these are, and they're pretty flower. And they flower in the summer when the bees need some food in the summer. And so last year they made a lot of peas, but I didn't harvest it in time, and some bugs like bored into the pods and ate them all. So bugs seem to like them a lot. But the tree is very vigorous and grows very quickly and provides this kind of speckled shade. And I planted it on the southwestern side of the garden to shade out the garden a little bit. Not completely because it's not dense shade. And then these is sage that I got from the grocery store, one of those living herb plants, and I planted it, and it's doing really well, and it produces these really pretty flowers. And next to this oregano, which I found out is a mint variety, and it tries to take over the garden, so I try to kill it every year. But it's very well established now, and you can't really get rid of the oregano. But if you try to kill it, then there's always some oregano left for use in cooking. This is the one raised bed we have, and I think this is like butternut squash. I'm not sure. I just planted random seeds in here, and I don't really know what's in there. It's a chaos garden, basically. That's zucchini, and then some volunteer tomato plants that grew up next to it. I'm probably going to have to thin this out. And then these are more tomato plants, and probably going to have to thin those out too. There's way too many of them. And here are some Korean genyip or shiso or perilla, eggplant back there, and then another eggplant over here, and then in between them is some pepper plants. I don't know what kind of peppers they are. I mean, they could be Thai peppers. These are Thai peppers, or they could be bell peppers, or they could be I don't know. There's some kind of pepper. And here is a cilantro that I'm letting to go to seed because cilantro flowers attract a lot of ladybugs and other beneficial insects. And also, I just need the seeds so I can plant cilantro again. Kale is not bolting, so I'm letting it be. And it looks really healthy and it doesn't have any aphids or anything on it yet, so I'm letting it go. It didn't do well over the winter, but now it's doing well after I put all this compost in. And then there's Chinese chives. And this is a hybrid tomato plant that I just got from the big box store. I think this is called a Big Boy. And these are yard long beans. And those are going to go up the trellis of this passion fruit vine that I have. This produces a lot of passion fruit. They're not very sweet, they're very tart, but it does well. These are some heirloom tomatoes, Cherokee Purple, I believe. And these always look good until July, and then when the heat comes, they die off. And I never get any tomatoes from them. So we'll see how they do this year. I keep trying, but I've never had much success with tomatoes, which is why I'm trying the hybrid tomatoes this year, and I'm hoping maybe the hybrids will do better. There's more artichokes next to this almond tree that I planted. People say you can eat these green almonds, and we tried them, but they're just not good. They taste like unripe peaches, which I guess if you like unripe peaches, those are good. This is the one grapevine that's producing some grapes. I have 4 grapevines, and so far this is the only one that's producing any grapes. I don't know what's wrong with the other grapevines, but this one is producing some grapes. I put these blueberry plants into a planter box because I thought that it'd be easier to keep them moist because they need a lot of moisture if I put them in a box, but sometimes I forget and the box dried out, and I think I lost one of my plants last year. And then sometimes I overwater and the box is underwater, but they seem to tolerate that pretty well. This is the first year the cherry trees are producing. This is a mini royal, and right next to it is a royal lee, and you have to have 2 of them together to pollinate. And so far the birds haven't found them, which is nice. This is the royal lee, which is planted like 10 feet away from it. And not a lot of cherries this year, maybe like 20 to 30, but hopefully they'll produce a lot more next year and when they're a lot bigger. And I probably need to take down the tree that's behind it that shades it out in the winter. This is another Fuerte avocado tree, which I planted this 3 years ago, and it's basically the same size. It kind of like dies out every summer and then revives every spring and grows back to the size it was and then dies out again. This is a avocado tree that I grew from seed, and then I tried to graft a Haas onto it. Now, I don't know if it's going to survive. The buds look kind of dried out, like it's not going to live, but the stem is still green. Now, this is a Haas that I planted on a bigger tree that's been there for 6 years, and it's budding out, so that's definitely succeeded. So hopefully you're going to get some Haas out of this. This is a tree I grew from seed 6 years ago. It never has produced any avocados. So I'm grafting some Haas, and maybe next year we will get some Haas avocados out of this tree. We shall see if it does. But the tree is very healthy and grows well in this spot. Mulberries that were grafted last year, even right after the graft, got a few mulberries out of the thing, but this year it's like over 10 feet tall and doing really well. So these should be ready in another month or less, but there's a lot of mulberries. And this is our pomegranate tree. It's a variety called Wonderful. It does really well. I completely neglect this thing. I barely water it, but it does really well and produces a lot of pomegranates every year. There's another pomegranate tree on the other side of the yard that makes pomegranates that are not great, and probably I'll cut that one down because the pomegranates are so mediocre from that tree. But this one does really well. Maybe I'll try to graft this one onto that one and switch varieties. Okay, well, I'll probably put up one of these every 2 weeks just so that I can keep track of the garden. But if you want to keep track along with me, thanks for watching.